My whole goal was not to prove to a judge or to a mediator that I was a good mom. It was to gain new knowledge and experience so that I never had to go through this again or put my children through this again. I didn't want to lose everything, and I didn't want to be a liar, and I didn't want to be manipulative. All these characteristics that I'd kind of gained or picked up on during my addiction wasn't who I was at the core of my being. You can change your life around for the better. It doesn't have to be what it was. I have my life back, and it feels really, really good to not be in such a dark place anymore. In Jackson House, I started to find myself again.
You or a loved one is facing mental health challenges or addiction. Remember, you're not alone. Jackson House can help. Hold on to hope and take the first step towards transformation.
My name's Jamie, but I go by JJ. It was a nickname that was given to me in the house because there was another person with the same first name. So, and it stuck. So I just go by it now. It feels right. But yeah, I'm JJ. I'm almost a year out of being in Jackson House. I was a functioning alcoholic until I wasn't. I was running away from the disease for a very long time. I come from the foster care system and was put in foster care because both of my biological parents were alcoholics. They both passed. And my twin brother was later diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome and some other diagnoses. So it was integrated into my life and ingrained in us at a very young age. And then my twin brother continues to struggle with addiction, and my older brother got sober about 4 years ago, and I got sober with him. But was what I now know is a dry drunk. I was miserable. I gained weight. I didn't have a community. I was just alone and not loving it. And then I wouldn't have even called it a relapse at the time. I just had an injury and started drinking again. And it, for me, I've struggled with mental health issues my whole life, which I now know is complex PTSD from what happened to us as children at such a young age, being put in foster care and trying to navigate feeling like we belong somewhere. And my brother struggled a lot harder, a lot earlier on. And I think for me, it hit me post-divorce and having children of my own. There was something about becoming a mom that made me reflect a lot on kind of what happened to me as a child. So I struggled, and then I was put on several 5150 holds and was in and out of the ER. I never really went there because of the drinking. I went there because of the mental health, or was taken there, I should say. So depression and alcohol were not a good combo for me. The drinking would make my depression worse, and then the suicidal ideations would quickly follow. And I just had a history of going to really dark places very quickly. It was always a slippery slope. And then I'd come out of it, and I'd gotten really good at talking myself out of the holds at the hospital. I'm educated. I can talk the talk, and I don't consider myself a manipulative person, but in those moments I was, because I didn't want to be there. And it wasn't even necessarily to go back home and drink. I'd go a month or 4 months and be sober again, and say, I'm never doing that again. That was the worst experience ever. 4 months later was drinking again. And it would start with a glass of wine and end with, a handle of vodka. And it got to a point where I didn't care if I lived or died. I love my children. They're my everything, but it's such an isolating disease, and mental health compounded on it. It's just a really toxic combo. So I had been drinking again, and there was an incident where I was playing with my kids, and they kind of pushed me, like wrestling off my bed and I hit my head and lost consciousness. And they called my sister and she was trying to walk them through some stuff. And then the police showed up at my door, and my children nor I have ever had any interactions with the police. So they checked on me, and I was lucid by then. And I was like, I'm fine. I'd been drinking. So I kind of talked him away from the porch and kept drinking. And then my best friends and sister had a text going on of kind of like, what do we do now? Um, so they were concerned about the drinking, of course, but also the head injury. So I ended up in the ER, and he let me go home if I promised to not drink when I got home. And of course, I made all the promises in the world. My best friend took me home. My other best friend who had taken me to the hospital took my children. And, I've known her for over 25 years, so they're comfortable with her. But I don't remember all of it. I had a pretty big meltdown and was kind of, okay, I'll go. No, I'm not going. I'd go in the bathroom for long periods of time. She, um, didn't know what to do or how to do it. She just knew that she had to get me to the hospital and that I'd never acted this way in front of my kids before. And, I'd scared them pretty bad. And this was all being told to me after. Um, but I got home. I don't know when I started drinking, but by my 9 a.m. counseling session the next morning, or therapy session, my sister was on it with me. It was very clear that I was intoxicated and apparently was talking about taking my own life and the boys would be better off without me. And another police officer showed up at the door, and that time they detained me and took me in handcuffs to um, the ER. So I was put on a hold, and my sister, I don't know how they got this information, but they said, we have in your chart that you've gotten really good at talking yourself out of these. I was like, ooh, there's more people involved in this than I would like to be because I'm kind of caught. I think I was on a 36 hold that time, and they let me go home. And I spoke with my best friend who had my children, and she basically said she was disappointed that they believed I'd been drinking and driving with the boys, and that I needed help, and that whether it was the depression and anxiety episodes or the drinking or the combo of both, they were tired. And, this had been 2 years of taking me and not knowing how to help me any longer. And she said that she would help my children's dad get full custody of them if I didn't seek treatment. And that was all I needed to hear. I didn't want the cycle of what I went through as a child to happen to me or my children. And I didn't know the full. She shared with me her um, experience from that night and how my youngest was crying and my oldest said my mommy's going to die, and just all these really horrific things that I would never sober have exposed my children to. So I started calling around, and I have Kaiser, so it's very specific where they'll treat you and send you. So that was a Sunday, and Monday I went to Kaiser and waited for 4 hours for them to see me. And the psychologist had said over and over she wanted me to go to IOP. And I asked, the difference between my treatment options, and she, it was on Zoom, so she couldn't really see my withdrawal effects, but I was definitely having them. Um, but I had to advocate, and I said, I need help, but I really had to kind of push for it. And she said, there's this amazing place called Jackson House. There's one in Hemet. I don't want to send you there, but if they have a bed open in San Diego, I'd love for you to go. And I said, okay. And she said, go home and wait for my call. And so it was a series of calls. I spoke with her, and then Joyce called, and I spoke with her and did the intake. And she said, I think you should come in right away. And I'm very grateful that on the way home from Kaiser, I didn't buy anything to drink because I don't think I would have followed through and gone. And I was sober by the time I left. So I paid some bills, and I, wrote my rent check, and let my neighbors know so they could feed my animals, and got an Uber. And I was there around 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon. I was terrified and I wanted to drink. And so I had just gotten off the phone with Joyce and was like, can I bring this? Can I not bring that? And I went and bought a couple vapes because she said you can have those on the premises, and called my sister and just stayed on the phone with her the whole time. And I was crying the whole way there, and I was scared, and I didn't want it to be like the psych holds I'd been on. She just was really encouraging and saying you're doing the right thing, and I don't want to get emotional, but because I'd sobered up and because somebody had had my children and I was told what I did and how things kind of played out, um, I just, the guilt and, the sadness of leaving them and not seeing them for a certain amount of time was starting to set in. Um, but yeah, there was fear, there was angst, there was, but there was relief also. I felt this sense of relief knowing that something had to change and it could only go up from there. It was like a little bit of being dropped off in Narnia. Everyone was out. What I now know is a smoke break. But they were, what's your name? Hi, Jamie, and being super friendly. I'm like, this is weird. And then Anthony did my intake, and it was just all so peaceful and so respectful. I mean, I thought I was going to get strip searched. I thought I was going to get strapped to a bed. Like, all these horrific things that had happened before, I thought were going to happen again, because I'd experienced them already. And I was like, okay, where's the clothes I have to put on, and where's the straitjacket, and where's the, phone being taken away. And none of that happened. And it was just so unique to what I had experienced before. And that was just within the first hour of being there. And then I got into the house and it was dinner time, and everyone was coming up to me and was so friendly. And I just didn't buy it. I was like, something is off here. There's no way it's going to be this really nice house and these really nice people and this amazing food that Chanel cooks. And um, it never stopped. It was just a really humbling experience. But I probably on day 2 or 3, I'd known I was an alcoholic long before I wanted to admit it. And I think for me, the label made me, um, it was, it made me, the reality of that was that I turned into my biological parents. And even though we'd been through the foster care system, who I consider my mom and dad, took us in until we were 18. And I'd gotten 2 degrees. I had a career. I thought I was immune to it. And even though my brother struggled and struggled, it wasn't going to happen to me. I'd done all the right things. I'm a good person. I, make the right choices. And it turns out nobody's, immune to it happening. And so by day 2, you're in the circle, and I was like, this is different. I'd been to some recovery meetings, but not AA. I was very anti-AA. Um, and I I think day 2 or 3, I was like, my name's JJ, and it turns out I'm an alcoholic. And I totally um relinquished control of all of it and just tried to accept it as much as I could, and learned a ton. I went to every single meeting. I think I maybe missed one, um, and just invested in the experience because something had to change. About a weekend, a social worker called me and told me that there was an open investigation. My therapist had filed a CPS report on me. Um, and that, I think, fueled um, my recovery to continue to stay present and stay committed to the process. Um, and that's what I did. And I stayed for the 30 days. And um, I am so grateful that I did, because my life has been completely different ever since. just being in the recovery journey and around other people recovering, I've heard horrific stories and beautiful comeback stories. And I didn't know that then, but um, if I could tell anyone now, it's that it does get better. You have to put in the work. You can't, skip the meetings and not take it seriously. And my whole goal, um, once I knew kind of what I was up against, was not to prove to a judge or to a mediator that I was a good mom. It was to gain new knowledge and experience so that I never had to go through this again or put my children through this again. And I think having gone through what I went through as a child, it was just like looking in a mirror. And I didn't love that at all. And I didn't want to lose everything. And I didn't want to be a liar. And I didn't want to be manipulative. And I didn't, all these characteristics that I'd kind of gained or picked up on during my addiction wasn't who I was at the core of my being. So, um, my family was very supportive. My best friends were in the loop. My ex-husband was very supportive. Um, they all just wanted me around and they were really, really scared that I was going to take my life and not be there for my kids. And they knew that that's not deep down what I wanted because they knew the Jamie prior to addiction and throughout all these years of the ups and downs of my drinking. I would say I was a good time until I wasn't in my 20s, right? So we'd go out partying and some nights would be really great. Sometimes I'd wake up the next morning and be like, who do I have to call and apologize to? And one of my friends said that. She's like, I'm glad you're sober now because of course we'd be devastated if you weren't with us anymore. But it's nice to know that the event or the activity or the outing we're doing isn't going to take a turn for the worse. Um, I was a paranoid drunk. I was a sad drunk. I was a traumatized drunk, so um, it only took 3 to 5 drinks. And I didn't stop drinking. I don't have the switch inside me. So they just knew that I wouldn't stop until I passed out. Um, I never got into any trouble, here and there we'd get kicked out of bars and PB, but no run-ins with the police or anything. And then in my 30s, I met my ex-husband, got engaged after 6 months, married a year later, had a kid, got pregnant 6 months after that. Like it was this very quick development. And so by the time I realized that I was in an abusive, toxic relationship, my 2 children were 4 months and 2 years old. And so then it's going into survival mode and becoming a single mom. And that's exactly what I did. So because I was so focused on them, the drinking wasn't really an issue. I would, have wine at night. Um, and then the pandemic hit and everybody was drinking and we would be drinking during the day and FaceTiming girlfriends from college. And it was just this thing. And I don't think I could quite get a grasp on it after that. Um, and then when I was sober for the almost 2 years, I actually did a lot of CBD and THC and trying all these other things, which I now know was just kind of focusing my addiction on something else. But you couldn't get, in my mind, I'm like, you can't get in trouble. I'm not making these poor choices. I actually found out later that THC makes anxiety worse. So it probably contributed to my mental health issues more than I thought. Um, and then, yeah, it was this stint from, when I relapsed, and probably it was March to when I went to Jackson House. It was the worst I'd ever been. The amount I could drink, the hiding, the telling my kids it's a medicine in the drink so you can't drink it. I put all these little things in place um, to keep them safe, so I thought. But I was drinking in the morning if I didn't have to go into the office, and then there was times by the end where I was drinking flights at lunch to keep the tremors away, and then the hallucinations were kicking in. So drinking wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't enjoyable. It wasn't to catch that buzz. It wasn't to go to sleep at night. It was literally to maintain. And I wasn't even getting drunk anymore. It was just drinking enough so that I seemed normal to everybody else. I could hold meetings, and I got really creative with how I did that. I drank vodka because it doesn't smell as much. I did all these things that people really swear that they will never do. And I became that person. And so, um, getting treatment was my only option, really. And then, of course, losing custody of my children would have been devastating. Um, Not being around for them their whole lives. Like, I look back now and I feel sick to my stomach thinking that I would have taken myself out of their equation and what they would have had to deal with. I think for me, even though there was a little bit of a ultimatum, it was still my choice. At the end of the day, I still chose to do it. And I think had I been pushed into that scenario, I would have come out and relapsed and done all the things. I think the biggest difference for me this time versus when I was a dry drunk is I have community. I have people I can call. I have an understanding of the disease and what it is, and that it's not something horrible that I did or chose for myself. Um, it just is. And you can either work it and work through the things and try to be on the other end of it, or you can continue to suffer until the addiction takes over. There's so many things. Um, I'm not going to remember what it is, but it's it's like the bell curve that goes up and down, and it talks about the phases of addiction. That was really eye opening. I loved Andrew is a tough cookie, but he breaks through more than most. And I really liked all of his, I don't know if you want to call them sessions or meetings. Um, I still, if I'm having a rough time, I'll pull out my folder. I kept every flyer, every resource, and I just was present. And I think that makes a huge difference. I saw some people in the house that weren't. I think people are there for different reasons, and that's fine. None of my business. I learned a lot from the counselors on kind of the reality of being in there, but also the reality of when you get out and what that looks like, and having things in place so that you can succeed. There was a guy in the house who was sober for 9 years, and his wife passed, and so he was back. And he would always say, go to a meeting, put your bags on the floor and go to a meeting right when you get out. And that was kind of his little takeaway for us when we left. And so that was one thing I learned. Pause was a big deal for me, knowing what pause is. And because I was I wasn't on a pink cloud like some people were, because reality hit pretty quickly. I went back to work a week later. I was really focused on getting custody of my kids back. So it wasn't completely taken away, but a mediator met with us and we had a system and plan where I'd see them for one day a week, and then we would build up after 3 months to 50-50 again. That was extremely hard. And, but I was determined to do it. And so pause helped, just understanding it, because in IOP, I was so irritable and I was like, why? I am so grateful some mornings. And then other mornings, I'm like, oh, everything felt like a drag. So understanding that was really helpful. Um, and then, a lot of what is presented is attending meetings. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. That was helpful to keep me on a schedule and a routine, because nobody's going to tell you how to do it when you get out unless you stay in the community and keep yourself accountable. Um, I probably went through 5 potential sponsors, um, but based on schedules and availability and locations, it didn't really pan out. and then I moved. So that was kind of part of my recovery as well. As I moved out of the house that, you know, held all the secrets and the addiction just thrived in, and moved up to North County to be closer to my kids, whose dad moved up a year prior. And that has been significant. There's never been alcohol in my home. Um, and there never will be. And so I've created some better boundaries around what I'm comfortable with as well, because people just want you around after, and you have to decide what you can withstand and what you can't. Drinking around me is not my issue. Isolating and drinking was my issue. So I have to be really aware of when I don't have my children and, you know, I'm by myself or I don't have a lot of things planned that week. I have to be really mindful about how I spend my time so that I don't slip into old patterns. I don't want to sound like textbook. It does get better. Um, Life can change for the better. It doesn't have to be what it was. It doesn't, you can change patterns and change habits, and it takes work. You just have to be willing to put in the work. I think I feel grateful because I know Jackson House as a recovery center is different than a lot of them. So I feel grateful that I got that experience because it was such a positive one. But just not to give up hope and to believe in yourself. I think a lot of us struggle with self worth and mental health issues, and really not, you have to be able to juggle all of it a little bit so that one thing doesn't slip and cause, you to fall again. Um, and if you do, it's okay. You can always come back. I've seen many people fall and come back, and it's such a open hearted and loving community. I've never felt so seen in my life. And although I am blessed enough to have my family and friends still in my life and have a great support system, they will never truly understand the core of my addiction and kind of what got me there and who I am, as much as the people in the rooms. And so I've made some of my best friends. I talk to them every day. And you can change your life around for the better. It doesn't have to be what it was. And for me, it's only gotten better. It will still life, things will happen. And I never try to tell people that it won't. Life will life. But just to make sure you have the tools in your toolbox and what works for you. Playing the tape to the end is my thing. I love that one. I learned about it in Jackson House, and I've used it a couple of times. Because this is a chemical imbalance, and our brains are changed for such a long time that it takes time to retrain yourself and um, regain, what you had before and what you can have in the future. So, yeah, I use my tools in my toolbox. I call my friends. I go to the meetings. Um, and I surrendered. And I think that was a really hard thing for me to do. Um, but I'm grateful I did it because life has really only gotten better since. And I have my kids back and I have my life back. And it feels really, really good to not be in such a dark place anymore. Word before would be broken. Um, the word now would be healing. I'm not totally healed. I still have some stuff to work through. I mean, we're all a work in progress, but um like I said, I feel like myself for the first time, and I can't say how long. And that's a really good feeling to love myself again. There was so much self-hatred and it was nice in Jackson House. I started to find myself again. And then I've just kind of continued to be comfortable with who I am and what I bring to the table. And it's made a difference. My children say, you weren't a bad mommy. You've always been a good mommy, but you seem happier, mommy. And them being in the know to what their 8 and 10-year-old minds, they don't know the nitty gritty details. They don't need to, but my oldest has held me accountable. On 4th of July, he's like, somebody asked if I knew where an alcoholic beverage was, and because I house sit for this house, and I didn't take it as that in the moment. I just said, "Oh, I don't drink. I don't know where the beverages are. I think they're over there." And my son put up his hand and he goes, "My mom's sober. She doesn't drink alcohol." And just kind of, walked out with me. He's very protective. And I think I didn't realize the impact I had on them until I was on the other side of it. And it really fuels my sobriety and keeps me grounded. My older brother and I, and it's sad that my twin isn't there, but he is so proud of me in a way that he wasn't before. He's like, you're back to your old self. Even when you were sober before, you weren't sober because your mind was always relapsing. And now we get to do that journey together and both break the cycle. We both have children. We both went through foster care together. We relate in a way that other people can't to the trauma that we experienced at such a young age. And I think that's our biggest hope and goal in this next chapter of our life, is to break the cycle from how we were parented. Recovery isn't easy, but it's so worth it. And I hope that my testimony, lands with somebody who really needs to hear it, so that more people can seek treatment and become a happier, healthier version of themselves.
If you or someone you know is on the fence about treatment, we would love to walk through your concerns with you. We offer a free, confidential consultation where we can better understand your needs and walk you through the details of treatment. Reach out today so we can learn how we can best support you. 888-255-9280 or visit us at jacksonhousecares.com.